It's the city attorney's office. Is that
All right.
Read up the city?
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to the September Citizens Forum. I appreciate especially everybody showing up when it's on a non-standard time, both a different day because of the Labor Day weekend and also a different time because apparently this room wasn't available until 10:30. And we're in a different location at the Ramsey County Library. Something else that is a little bit different this time, so way of that. I set up just my home video camera back there. We've got the usual folks here recording, and I thought, since I don't know what exactly happens to those, it would be nice to have a copy available in its entirety, perhaps, to the public, for folks who can't make it here. I'm planning to put that on Vimeo or some online site that's accessible. But I haven't, this is all news to city staff, and I haven't talked to the rest of the council about it, but I think it would be nice if we could do these and get them in rotation on the city's cable channel, especially since we have these informative presentations and the opportunity for more back and forth with residents about issues of concern. So maybe we'll see if that can happen. Obviously, in these budget times, we don't want to be spending a lot of money on bringing out a camera person and stuff like that. If the cheap home video camera does the job, maybe we'll be able to bootstrap it ourselves here. So, in terms of format, today's presenting staff member is Mr. Chuck Bethel, who is the city's Employment and Labor Relations Attorney. And so Chuck's going to be giving us a presentation on what he does. This year is it's collective bargaining time, so we're going to be negotiating, we're in the process of negotiating contracts with all of the city unions and bargaining units, even as we speak. And so this is a great chance to corner Chuck. While he may not disclose a lot of specifics on bargaining strategy, he at least can certainly answer questions about what we are able to do within the confines of the law in dealing with those labor issues. And then we'll also have some open discussion. Chuck says it's been taking time to be terribly long, so after we have some Q&A related to that. I'll open it up to general questions about everything related to the city. We also have Chuck All here. Chuck is the Assistant City Manager and Director of Public Works. Mr. Anston, who normally is at these meetings, is recovering well from some medical procedure, but is not back yet, so Chuck is in his hot seat in the interim. What has often happened at these things before is we sort of start with introductions around the table. I know just about everybody here, but we can do that anyway, and let us know what's your name, and if you have any particular issue that you'd be interested in us talking about after the initial presentation. Why don't we start over here with Elizabeth?
All right, Elizabeth Sletton from Maplewood. I'm Diana Laundry, and I live over on the west side of Maplewood, and I do have to leave, I'm sorry, at 11 o'clock. So the issue that I wanted to talk about is the issue of, while I think that the presentations are informative, while they're not televised anywhere, it would be, I think, a better use of resources when we have all the city staff here doing these presentations, that the presentations are then televised so that everybody can see them, since we're investing so much time in staff time to come on Saturday. The other issue that I have is that so much time is dedicated to staff presentations that the Citizens Forum is no longer the Citizens Forum, it is the city's symposium. And I think that it is important to be able to have a goodly amount of time, certainly 75% of the time, to be allocated to citizen concerns, because there's a lot of things that happen during the council meeting that we may not understand what's going on, or where's the data on those particular issues, and that it's important to be able to ask the elected officials exactly what went on. It would be helpful to have the copy of the next meeting's agenda before us if we're having a council meeting the next Monday right after a citizens forum, so that way the elected official who's here, should be preferably the mayor in my opinion, is here to be able to say, here are the things that are going to be on the council agenda, so that way people know what's going on. The other issue that I have is that I think the idea of not reading the consent agenda items at the council meeting so that people at home know what those consent agenda items are is the wrong direction. It's not very transparent, and I request that the council go back to reading the consent items that are being considered so that everyone at home knows what they are.
Okay. At least some of those hopefully will be taken care of with the format here today, and with at least the chance to bring some video to staff and the rest of the council and see if they're up with broadcasting idea.
Okay, I'm Veronica Sletman. I guess I agree with Diana, and because as much as I think that the staff presentations are important, it is a concern of mine, is that the staff actually don't do this just out of goodness of their heart, that they are paid. And I don't think that's the best use of our money in these times, especially in that if we wanted this kind of information, it should be presented in a different form, perhaps at City Hall. You could do it on another day, and anyone that's interested can come to City Hall and get the information. But I think the intent of the Citizens Forum is just that. It's the citizens' opportunity to share information and ask questions and not have an in-service type of deal going on. One might, and I'm sure this is not the intent, is to fill up time so people can't express their concerns.
Well, my name is Mark Bradley, and I'm here. I've got two issues. The first issue kind of echoes what has already been said. I have been saying for a long time that we have to, in the council, when they listen to the portion that is the public speaking, as well as in the forum here, there should be documentation of that. And it seems ironic that we hear constantly where certain people be coming back up, I won't name them by name, with the same issue that kind of is parroted time and time again. But in truth, it never has been addressed, because the fact is it's never been put onto the council's docket. And this is something, when a private individual does bring an issue up, it should be at least receiving merit for the position that it was brought for the seriousness of what it will affect on the city. In this case, you're going to be able then to tell the person who came in to present it initially that you are addressing it, how it is being addressed, if it's been voted up or down, so that he may be able to attend that portion of it. He should also be aware of what's happening during the time that situation has been brought up. Because it doesn't matter if it's a forum or if it's a council meeting, if it's important enough to be taking time off of any presentation, it's important enough that it should be recorded so that we all can understand where we're going with the situation as it stands. The other thing is we are still in a situation where we are financially finding that it's difficult for our businesses at this point. We've seen quite a few fail in the last couple of months, and we should be addressing how we're going to be able to help them or make movements or convince them that there is a reason to make change at a time when it doesn't seem economically or logically. Because logistically, if you don't make that change at this point, the city's going to continue to go down. So you have to address all the businesses. I can name a couple like The Rock and The Mist that are here, that are sitting open right now. We should be addressing those problems and trying to say, okay, if they have a way of taking care of it, let's try to encourage them to do it, and maybe even have the city be a partner in that. If we find they are floundering and have no type of ambition, and they're going to sit like Oakdale did with a certain mall that's been sitting forever until that last Jewish waterfall came and now it's contaminated bad enough they can destroy it. We have Jewish lightning that seems to happen a lot around here. And the problem is that, and I'm not just saying in Maplewood alone, I mean in the whole state, where a lot of properties that are very valuable for different reasons. Minneapolis had one which was supposed to be one where they had a house that was, Minnesota State was sold on, but no guarantees are made when somebody's supposed to be up in it. There's no insurance on these houses. There's a lot of questions that should be addressed that would kind of guarantee that if you feel it's important, that person's going to at least have to put enough insurance on it that it's going to put a liability that he realizes Jewish lightning is not the way to go, if you get my gist on that point. But for those who don't understand, that means that a coincidental hazard has happened to the property and it actually goes out to the line. I can name all kinds of properties across the whole state of Minnesota that have had this incident in the last 5 years. But we should be addressing these to try to help our city improve. And we can't do that if we're ignoring the facts. Making sure that code violations are always taken into consideration. That will also encourage the owner of the property to improve it enough or try to maybe put it back on the market faster. Are ways we can entice an owner, but on the other side, we can also entice them by maybe some type of program that would encourage him to make a change. There's a couple of hotels right now are kind of dilapidated and really need improvement. Maybe we could encourage them to make that improvement to make our city seem a lot more progressive and a lot more popular and more important to come to than other cities if we can improve our whole identity.
I'm Joe Waters. I came to hear Chuck Hall speak on the budget, but since he's not speaking, I'm leaving. No, I'm just kidding. As far as your Jewish lightning is concerned, in the fire service, we call it friction, mortgage meets insurance.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and I feel there's a lot more of it going on as well. Yeah, I do believe there's some issues we need to address in the business community. And as far as the rock is concerned, the rock's problem actually started with the smoking area. And it just went downhill from there. So, but that's all like I said, I was here to hear Chuck. Since he's not speaking.
We can always put him on the spot. I'm going to make a note here. Put Chuck on the spot.
Chuck Hall.
Chuck A. on the spot.
Dave showing injury, he's well to rock, and Mr. Rossbach said 2 years ago, he had it his way, get rid of all the nightclubs. That's what he said. Quote, he said that.
He did say that.
Yes, he did say
He
that.
doesn't speak for the entire council.
Thank
for
you.
one nightclubs. And actually, something that I should mention in that department, you recall, was it Stargate, what it was called, over on Ray Street, that was taken over with new ownership. We actually, I believe in Monday's consent agenda is the report after they got all their code issues taken care of and up and running. And the police have been checking in regularly. And there have been no police calls under the new management since it's been there. Apparently there have been a couple of calls to the same address, but it's another business at the same address. It's a hotel or I don't recall what it was. There's some other business at the same address. No, there was, yeah.
Whatever.
Well, anyway, there was something odd in the report that I thought, hotel.
Okay, the other thing is, if there's anything in the monthly flyer called, you should have any important thing to be on the first parts of the, like you had a whole thing about, I don't want to get this all into it. You had a whole thing about the audit. And I've never seen a long audit like that before. Have you seen one written up that much on audit in that flyer?
Oh,
No,
No,
I
I
mentioned
know.
in the past, but maybe
That's
not
good.
before.
yeah.
Any major things, okay, a major thing to me, and this is a rumor flying around again, because I asked 4 months ago that Maplewood's going to join other cities, or if they have, to take their RVs and trailers and campers and stuff out of your driveway and yada yada. Is this true?
It's completely news to me. But
Okay.
I will ask Chuck about that when we get to the Q&A, but I haven't heard anything about that.
Well, that's good to hear. And one more item. This is Taste of Maplewood. How do we come out on that?
That's another good question, which I we need to ask staff. And this will give us a chance to see if Chuck knows.
That's it.
Thank you, Dave.
John Fisher, just got a question about the city council being able to use speed limits on certain roads for safety purposes. If they have any input in that.
John Fraser, settings over speed limits. I'll get back to you. Don't worry. Ralph.
Ralph Sletton, North Maplewood. And my things to do with this particular meeting. It's called the Citizens Forum, and I'd like it to be returned to the citizens and not have these many things going on each time. Because I think what the purpose is takes away from the citizens, no time left for them to say anything, so then we just leave. The other thing is I've noticed, and I think other people have noticed, is the arrogance on certain members of the council. When people get up to talk, they're talked down to, they're told to hurry up, get down, sit down and shut up. And I'm sick of hearing that on television. And I think the other members of the council that are possibly not doing that should have a talk with the ones that are and make sure it stops. And that's an issue for me.
You had one more
Duly
issue.
noted. Oh,
You had said you had a question about who authorized.
Oh, that's the other
just
thing. Who authorized having these many things go on here when we didn't have it before?
No. Muscular dystrophy, the telethon. You said who authorized Maplewood to double donations?
Oh, yeah, double their,
When people called in.
yeah, they call in with their, whatever they.
there's some kind of matching.
Well, what happened,
Matching
if I
grant.
may?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, the Firefighters Association was at MD and they were volunteering their time on the phones. So when they were volunteering their time, they had the dollar amount of,
And then Maplewood would double their,
of such and such dollars, and then how many phone calls came in within a minute period. Then they would double that donation to MD. And so we wanted to know who authorized, specifically the city of Maplewood, to double those monies for MD.
Well, it's completely news to me, and so I also would like to know the answer to
and
that
that
question.
should have been decided
And,
months ahead of time.
Well, that
So
should
people
have
are-
been.
you know, it could be, I'm familiar with corporations having matching programs for charitable gifts and stuff like that. I'm not aware of anything like that with
Yeah,
city employees.
It was a
was 9,000.
female representative from the
Okay.
city of Maplewood, firefighters.
So maybe the staff knows about that, but we'll have that on the list.
And then I didn't know you were supposed to get our questions.
Oh,
Previously,
sure.
sorry about that.
You know, I thought that was odd that normally you have one or two.
My question actually, it has to do with bonuses, staff bonuses. When staff receives their bonuses, how often they receive their bonuses. So
And
that's-
why?
Well, yeah, so mine has to do with staff bonuses.
And we have the guy who knows all the collective bargaining agreements with all the city unions, so he should be able to answer that question. And then the last person is Ann, who arrived a little bit late. Did we send you to the wrong place first?
I'm coming. Do you have this Pride of Maplewood once a month? Is
Yeah.
that an employee?
Yeah.
Who gets to pick the employee?
You know,
The other employees.
the other employees do, and they get like a mug, I believe, to
Do we
celebrate.
have anything to say about it?
I
Because
think that you could certainly nominate people to other employees and say, you know, I think this person is fantastic.
okay,
and they
I would
really
like
ought
to nominate Michael Foltz. He has been really great in answering my emails about programming on 7:15.
I think Michael is fantastic too, and so
Yeah,
I
and
will,
he's been
I will
really
second
polite.
that suggestion.
No,
We
third.
have two staff people here.
I'll third that one.
We will third it. People like Michael.
Well, I would fourth
Fourth
it.
it.
He can get the
All right,
sound.
anybody
No,
here
no,
not-
I have a
Oh, the sound
qualifier.
issue?
I have a qualifier in that the sound has to be adjusted properly for the council meetings. And you
Yes.
gotta learn how to use that trim on there so that people, you can actually understand
Yeah.
what people are
Now,
saying.
it's not
You actually
usually-
have to start
It's
the
not
meeting
usually
when the meeting
Michael in the
starts.
booth anymore, but there have been some sound issues. And something I've noticed too, my wife has even sometimes texted me to say, I can't understand what anyone's saying. Although then when it's on the playback cycle, it is okay. So I've gotten at least there have been some times when I've gotten the impression that there's something with the live feed going in to the SCC offices, and I don't understand exactly why that is, because the very same audio feed will be coming through perfectly clear on the streaming, and it will be flying on the playback. So I know that there are a couple of sound-related issues in the council chambers that they're working on.
But actually to start the meetings on time too.
That would
Because
be
there's,
good.
yeah, there's been some issues, the 23rd meeting, people didn't even get to see the meeting, it was like an hour and a half, at the end of the city council meeting, they saw and that was it, so there's some issues with that.
Oh, because of the sound not working?
No, there was actually
You
no
didn't
meeting.
turn on the camera.
You didn't turn, the camera wasn't on,
Right.
so the
So it
23rd
wasn't
meeting,
recorded.
the city council
It
meeting.
wasn't played live.
But it was the
It
full
wasn't played
meeting was on
live,
the
it was
replay.
recorded but not played
Okay.
live.
Whole meeting was on replay.
Now, that again sounds like some issue. So,
Is there
Chuck
a-
is taking notes. We'll get on Michael's case and I'll make sure that he tracks down what's going on with the bandwidth or whatever is the cable commission.
Because I had emailed Michael on that too, and he got back to me and told me when the replays were, and
Good.
it was a full program on the replay.
Excellent.
And then the other thing is, I'm not too happy about this Buren and this wafers recycling. What is she trying to do, break Maplewood? And why isn't that settled? I mean, this has been going on for so long. Can't they take it to court and tell her to go to HELL?
You know, as I've learned, the legal process takes a while, and you'd be surprised at how long it can take to just get to a day in court. I believe that later this month there will be a hearing on summary judgment on one of those cases. But there are, I'm not sure I know how many, there's at least 4 separate legal actions in different courts and different venues that are currently active. And
Because it seems like such stupid things that she's suing Maplewood.
But how are you basing your information on? How do you know it's stupid?
Well, the information I got from the Maplewood Review.
Okay, honey.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I joined the Fox to ask how the president's doing.
But no, and
I'll
in
leave that straight
seriousness,
here. You know
I would
about
always give both
newspapers.
sides of the story.
Well, they don't always get it exactly right.
Yeah.
So the thing though is that you know there's a legal process, and it sometimes takes a very long time to unfold. And I'm sure I can speak on behalf of this city that we would like to have it done and you know no longer taking up staff time and no longer running up bills. And I'm sure that's true for the League of Minnesota City as well. So hopefully we'll see something happen on some of those issues, and everybody will get their day in court and resolve in one way or another.
But you know, like, the city is like the big guy, and you assume everything they do is correct, proper. Not necessarily
There's so many people that are so happy today too.
But, I could talk to you, but let's get together for a little.
Well, you guys can have a, what do they call it, the legal profession, a sidebar?
Yeah, we'll do that someday.
Well,
We'll get
and
together
then
and
the
do that.
third
Okay.
thing, is there anything that Maple can do about all the green scum that are on some of the ponds in Maplewood?
Pond scum, issue number 3.
Oh, there's another word for it, and it's a good thing,
Because
actually.
there's- Well, the algae, yeah, there's one, I know a lot of it comes from people fertilizing their lawns and that, but there is one pond on Sterling and Lavender where there's no houses around it, and that's starting to get green scum on it now too, or algae.
Well, thankfully we have Chuck here, and he's an expert in public works, and I know a lot of those issues are related to runoff and stormwater management and all the stuff that we do whenever we have a street project to try to reduce the nutrients that wash into those things. And some of it may have to do with you know, the local the seasons and the local conditions of a particular pond, but we'll toss that Chuck's way.
Well, I thought we were all going green, so now you're complaining about green. Everybody's talking about green, drives me nuts.
Yeah, when it comes to water, we like it a little bit more blue.
Yeah.
Green, blue,
Yeah.
one or the other. So I think that takes care of the preliminaries, and I will now turn it over to Mr. Bethel for a rundown on this, and we'll see if we can then play some of the issues that were brought up and any other questions that come up.
Well, thanks, and I heard what you had to say. I'll be very quick, and we'll get back to what your concerns are. I just wanted to give a quick overview of the City Attorney's Office, what it does, what I do within it. City Attorney's Office handles you can break it down into 3 basic areas. We prosecute crimes, we handle all the city council meetings, all the contract work, all the real estate related work that the city's involved with, which is a lot. And we do all the bargaining with the labor groups and handle all the employment issues with regard to all the employees that we have. And that's my area. I do the labor and employment issues. I do assist Alan Cantor, who's the other city attorney, on, for instance, he was on vacation this past week, and so I assisted on some of the other areas, and I have in the past as well, but this is my area that we're going to talk about today. Virtually all the members of the city are members of the collective bargaining group. We have 2 employees who are not, Chuck All and Jim Antonin, the manager and assistant city manager. So we bargain with 7 different groups. According to the law, we have to meet and confer with each of these groups and negotiate on the terms and conditions of employment and resolve grievances. Side note, there's 2 basic kinds of grievances we handle. They're interest arbitration, interest, which is they're grieving a contract and the amount of money we pay, or they're grieving a termination or some other discipline. It's kind of the 2 areas. Here's the bargaining groups we work with: International Association of Firefighters. There's 2 divisions of that, one for the firefighters, one for the firefighter officers. Likewise, there's 2 for the police. There's 1 for patrol and law enforcement labor services for the sergeants. And then we have AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We have metro supervisors who are our supervisors, and we have legally confidential and supervisory, which are people who are confidential and or supervisory employees. And that comprises the entire city. Yes? That's a good question. Confidential, the way it is presented here means that they are involved with labor negotiations, and they are privy to confidential information with regard to those negotiations. It doesn't mean that they just know somebody's social security number that they have access to, or somebody's home address. Confidential within this category means they have privileged or confidential information with regard to the labor negotiations and strategies during collective bargaining.
Who would they be in the city?
Typically, it's the top. It's the department heads or assistant department heads, because when I do collective bargaining, I need to go to them and I need to say, look, the police officers say they need $200 more a year for uniform allowance because they need to get a special kind of holster or belt or Kevlar vest or something, and I need input from them, and we need to strategize on whether that's a real request that's really needed, or is it just something that they want and don't really need. And I'm just using that by way of an example. That's one example of the type of strategizing or confidential information as this is referring to that we would be talking about.
Why couldn't that be handled by the supervisor? You don't need an extra person for that.
Well, the department head generally has the best idea of what the department's needs are, and the employees in the department what their needs are. So you go to the department head and say, for instance, Chuck is, if it's a public works matter and I want to find out how public works is operating, what they really need, and what we should strategize for, then the department head, Chuck All, would be the guy who would have the best information for me to go forward with. Yes?
Who's the department head for finance?
Right now it's Gail Baum.
Is she the director then? She's
I
the
think
manager.
I think that her title is finance department manager.
Right.
And we had a department director, Bob Medit, who resigned, and Gail was hired as department manager, which I think is going to evolve into a director position, but right now I think it's a different title.
So now, is each department changing their titles? So are you utilizing your titles with some flexibility, it sounds like, or are now the directors going down to strictly managers? How is that? Because it would seem to me that the finance department is the only department that doesn't so-called have a director.
Well, Karen Guilfoyle, I believe, is called Citizen Services Manager.
Well, it's director. So in the org chart, it's director.
Well,
Yeah, so back to my question
Yeah.
is that what's happening in the city?
to my knowledge, no, but it could be something that does happen. We look at, I'll give you a kind of a broader scope answer. We look at job titles and job descriptions. It's an ongoing process. We look at how, work changes, workflow changes, what your duties are changing. You all know that from working yourselves, that your job kind of changes sometimes, and you start doing stuff you didn't do before, you stop doing stuff you did do before. And so from a human resources standpoint, we want to be sure that job descriptions match what people are actually doing and titles fit for what those job descriptions are. And a couple things that we look at when we do that is we look at other cities and see, you know, what does their police lieutenant do? What does their, you know, civil engineer do? And what are their duties and what are their titles? And we kind of, and other cities do this too, because we talk with them when we try to get a standardization process such as we can. But it's hard because all cities have different setups, and so you can't always compare apples to apples. You try, and that gets into...
Well, I just have one caveat on that. So
Yeah.
if you have, utilizing your example of a lieutenant, sergeant, and the police department, so each lieutenant, if they were to get a bonus, that would be equal a bonus across the board for the lieutenants because of their pay salary, their rate. So what I'm saying with the department heads is if you have a director, a manager, is that an equal? So the bonus would be an equal amount between the department directors versus having a secretary or something like that.
I think, if I understand your question correctly, is the change in title from department manager to department director involve a change in benefits or change in
Correct.
pay or something
Yep.
like that?
Yep.
To a certain extent, yes. And I think that's probably one thing. That's one thing that we look at when we make, if we're going to make a change on titles. We look at, you know, what is the pay? What does a finance director get in Roseville? What does a finance director get in Eden Prairie, wherever? And are the job duties that this person is doing the same as the person in Roseville? And so the pay and the title, we try to compare apples to apples, but you can't always do that. And I can give you an example, but wait, I'll take this other question.
No, finish up, sure, I just want to make sure.
Okay, and so, for instance, there's, in the police department, they have ranks, you know, and so we have lieutenants, and we find that when we try to compare lieutenants to other cities, they may have captains who do a lot of the duties that our lieutenants do, and vice versa, our lieutenants may do duties that other sergeants do. There's overlap there, so it's hard to sometimes compare apples to apples. But that's what we try to do, and that's how we try to set salaries when we do because collective bargaining is where you set the salaries. And then I just wanted to talk about the bonuses. I'm not sure I understand what you mean by bonuses. We have steps that they get. Like if you work 4 years or 8 years or 12 years or 17 years, you may get a step after working that many years for the city. So we have those steps. And then we have COLAs, which is the cost of living increase that they bargain for each year. But I don't know that there's actually bonuses, because I think in the private sector, bonuses, you work all year and your department excelled and you did really good and you made a lot more money for the company. They may give you a bonus at the end of the year, a Christmas bonus or an end of year bonus. And the city really doesn't have a bonus plan like that. So I think maybe you're talking about steps or COLAs when you're talking about bonuses. If you're not, I'm not sure what bonuses that would be.
We don't have any kind of one-time.
You don't have
Never
one
have.
bonus for,
Never had it. Everybody gets the same bonus.
everybody gets
Zero.
their.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have zero, no bonus plan. I don't know that any government agency is allowed
So-
to have bonuses.
In
So
private
what kind of
sector,
step, hang on though, because I'm close to my
Well, no,
my question being
I
answered.
know, but I'm
Is-
answering the question on the bonus because when I was in the fire department, we did have bonuses for about the 6 years I was district chief. We had bonuses. Because we had to fill out.
Joe, I think there were merit.
oh, they did have a merit pay
Merit
system
system.
years
based
ago.
upon
They-
evaluation.
Yeah, that's
Mike
true.
McGuire did, but Firstman did away with the merit.
Oh, this was under Ferguson.
So-
Firstman did away with it.
Yeah, this was under Ferguson.
Right. He inherited it from McGuire and he did away with it in his second and third year, I think. So we haven't had it since '03.
And I was speaking now, that is true, there was a merit system before I got here. Like Chuck said, that was done
So
away.
your steps is basically your step bonuses is your yearly, so if you like have a pay increase, that's your step increase.
Well, yes,
That you receive as the.
So
as
it's your
the
base
employee.
salary. So if you've
That's
been
what it
with,
is.
just like if you've been with a company for 5 years, you say, hey, I should get a, you know.
You get a 25-cent step
Right.
increase or whatever
Right,
per
exactly.
hour.
But it's
whatever
not
it
something
is.
that goes away then, like a bonus would be
No,
a one-time
like
thing.
our-
So your step isn't.
Our patrol-
$10,000 bonus
No.
for
Right.
a month, okay.
Our patrol officers is a pretty good example of that. They start out at a base, and each year, of their first 3 years, they get a raise in that base. And that's a step. And then after that, there's a 4, 8, 12, 16, or 17-year step after that, but that's after they work for 4 years or 8 years or 12 years.
Oh, one final
Now,
question.
just wait, back up. Okay, my question now was on that Maplewood confidential and supervisor.
Sure.
Does that require 2 people?
Does what require to be?
A confidential person and a supervisory person?
Yeah, it could be a person who is confident, it's confidential and supervisory, but if it was someone who was just confidential and not supervisory, that is the unit they would be in as well.
Is that overkill?
Well, it was a choice that the employees themselves made to unionize about 5 years ago, where they formed this union basically with all the department heads and confidential people into one unit.
Ralph's question is, you have an employee be both confidential and supervisory. You're talking about 2 different employees.
Right.
It's the employee that makes a decision about which group they're in, and so they have to meet that criteria. So a department head has to meet it. It's not that we hire an employee to be confidential and another employee to be supervisory. They can be both, and they have to be both to be in that group. If they're only supervisory, then they're in the Metro Supervisors Association. Yeah, so it's not, no, we're not hiring 2 people to cover one job.
Be a confidential person,
No.
and then we're paying that too.
No.
There are a couple of employees, actually, Chuck, just a minor correction here, there are a couple who are just confidential, and they're in that group, because that's the only group.
Right.
And
An
the,
HR person, our IT people are in that
And our-
group because they have to be able to access private email data in order, when there's a data request, they have to see people's private
Well,
emails. So
and-
they're a confidential group.
more than that, they help me prepare for bargaining by, I say, look, here's some data, I need this data figured out, manipulated, get it ready. And so people like in payroll or in IT help me through the bargaining process, and that puts them under that confidential category. This is just the statute that I have to follow with regard to all the bargaining that I do, the grievances, arbitrations, mediations. There's a group called BMS, Bureau of Mediation Services. You can go to the web and do BMS, and it will come up, and they have additional rules and regulations that we follow. They also provide the arbitrator list. If we have a grievance and it's not settled, it goes to arbitration. They provide us a list of arbitrators that we have to pick from to do it. This is kind of a flow chart, but it's not an exact flow chart because it doesn't always go like this. But we negotiate new contracts, then we implement the contracts. And whenever you implement the contracts, you get complaints and problems, and so you have to deal with the complaints and issues that come about with implementing and interpreting the contracts. And those lead to grievances, which could turn into mediations or arbitrations. Then a lot of times when you settle those, or sometimes in any of these stages, you go to a memorandum of understanding, which may alter the contract to resolve the issue that came up, and then you negotiate new contracts. So that's an ongoing circle of life thing every year. Yes.
So can you give us some examples of that? I mean, I recall, for example, last year, I believe we were having to deal with some budgetary things. It was either last year or the year before. We wound up getting memorandums of understanding that related to like some days off that were unpaid or things like that as part of the vetting process, or also early retirement programs.
The memorandums of understanding can take a wide range. They basically deal with any issue that comes up that is affecting the terms and conditions of employment for the employees, because that's what the collective bargaining agreements, which are contracts between the city and the bargaining group, cover. And so for instance, we instituted an early retirement program, and because we're going to pay somebody a little bit differently if they give early retirement, that's something that has to be negotiated with the unions, and we have to sign a memorandum of understanding, yes.
I just have a quick question that's kind of semi-related to that, because you're talking about early retirement.
Yes.
Has the city of Maplewood had anyone recently that has left the city of Maplewood or has retired, like within the last month?
Yeah, we've had a couple.
A police officer and a clerk in the deputy register.
Who's left?
And those end up saving the city. The early retirement program is a very successful program for saving us money, which, as you all know, we need to save money because these people take early retirement, and that means that their job opens up where we can hire an entry-level person, pay them a lot less, or sometimes we don't fill the position right away. It stays open until the end of the year, and that's all money saved. That's all money we save by them doing that. So,
Can you
but we
say
have to
who
have
left?
a memorandum of understanding with the
Can you
union.
say who left?
Pardon?
Can you say who left?
Yeah, I think so, but I can't remember the
Carol
name.
Jocko
Yeah.
of the clerk's department and Cabot Wilson of the police department.
Okay. So are you currently posting for those positions, or?
Carol's position was an internal promotion, well, not even promotion, we kept the vacant position, so we just moved someone. So her position remained vacant, and the police officer, we're still down in the process. I think one day the council will swear in the two new officers.
Between the retirements and, of course, the unfortunate death of Sergeant Bergeron, the process for hiring police officers takes a lot longer than the other positions because you have to go through the whole testing process and the civil service process and so forth. So the officers that are going to be sworn in on Monday, their hiring must have begun sometime last year, I bet.
Don't you have a list that you're
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So there's
Typically,
a
the list
list.
lasts for about 18 months.
Yeah, and I recall here that the list had been exhausted fairly recently, and so the Civil Service Commission has gone back to interview and qualify more candidates and rank them again.
I don't mean to interrupt your thing, but this.
No, this
does
is
it
your
kind of-
citizens forum. Go ahead.
This kind of led into the officers that you're going to be swearing in, and where they come from.
One's from North St. Paul, and the other one is somewhere in the South Metro, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I remember seeing about them. So, one is from North St. Paul.
Okay, I'll move on. Anyway, so this is kind of my little circle of life of managing labor issues in Maplewood, and I'm basically right here now because we have all the contracts coming up for 2011. So we're in the middle of, or at the beginning to middle of negotiating all your contracts. Then we have, aside from the labor issues, we have employment law issues. These are issues that come up through usually a disciplinary process or hiring or firing. And I try to provide training to the employees, specifically to the department heads and supervisors, to help minimize the risk. This is the first slide of a training PowerPoint presentation that I do for managing performance and discipline. I'm not going to give you the whole thing here because we would be here the rest of the day because it does take all day. But what happens when performance is not successfully managed? There's a high risk for internal problems, low morale, less productivity, and a high risk for legal problems such as lawsuits and arbitrations. And so it's important from a risk standpoint, economic standpoint, to successfully manage performance of the city. And so here's my circle of life for managing performance issues in Maplewood. This is true of any job, it's not just the city. You set goals for the employees, they do the work, you give them coaching and discipline as needed. Coaching is you go to the employee and say, you're doing a good job, but you need to pick it up in this one area, or whatever the situation might be. And discipline is the other side of that coin, where you do the coaching and it doesn't work, then you say, I'm going to have to give you a written warning, because if you don't start towing the line and doing the job, you could be terminated. And then performance reviews are where you discuss what's been happening with doing the work and coaching and discipline, and then you follow up with more coaching and discipline after the performance review in setting goals. So that's kind of the circle of life for managing performance, which is a key to keeping your lawsuits down and keeping morale and productivity up. performance review evaluations. This is the lead slide for a training session I do on using documentation for both annual employee reviews as well as employee files, what goes in a personnel file, what the supervisor's responsibilities are with regard to keeping documentation. And I'm not going to do that whole training for you either, but I just, this is something I do every year with the supervisors for the city now. Other duties as required, this is some of the things I do. I have assisted with prosecution, and I do go to city council meetings on an as-needed basis. I sit on the different labor management committees. I act as our affirmative action EEO manager and on the green team. Here's some questions. Now, you have your own questions, so we don't have to do this. I just threw these in here. Why can't we reduce everyone's pay? Why can't the mayor just hire, fire whoever he wants? Why do we have to have all these unions?
All good questions.
Well, we can't just reduce everyone's pay basically because we have a contract. It says you're gonna work 40 hours and we're gonna pay you X dollars, and to reduce their pay, we would have to do an MOU, memorandum of understanding, to amend the contract. We can't. If we just stop paying them what we're supposed to pay them, that's a breach of contract, and we'd have a lawsuit on our hands.
Kind of.
Sure.
I might as well throw it in now because
What's that?
these unions, I don't care what union it is, the only thing that gets me all upset about this unionize this, unionize that. Number one, I can't believe that they have supervisors in the union.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. It's unheard of.
Department heads too. Yeah, it is unusual.
Very unusual.
Yes.
The other thing is, when do these unions learn to stop?
Yeah.
I gotta have more. And you're talking about, how about a zero for the next 5 years?
Well,
I know, I worked at a place 41 years,
Yes.
bought these unions, and finally this the major corporation, they closed the place down because of the unions.
well,
Relationship with place down because they do it.
I actually,
Because,
I'm going to address that. I'll get to that slide in a second.
let's come up one more thing.
Yeah.
How many more amenities do they have to have?
Yeah.
It's, when do they draw the line?
You're voicing the concern a lot of people have.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's
Thank
right.
you.
And I'm going to address it in just a second. Why can't the mayor hire or fire whoever he wants? Maplewood is a Plan B city. The Plan B city means it's a council manager plan. The city manager hires and fires. Mayor and city council set the budgets and hire and fire the city manager. So that's their ultimate control. If they don't like the way it's going, or they don't like who's being hired or who's being fired, they can't actually physically hire and fire people. They hire and fire the city manager. Yes.
Chuck, just on the previous one, the idea of cutting pay. This obviously, if you have an existing contract, you can't simply unilaterally change its terms. What about, as we're in the stage now where we're putting together new contracts? Why can the city not simply go and say, well, here's your new contracts. They've got 15% pay cuts for everybody.
Right. Well,
Just like airlines and stuff like that.
we go to, when we can't agree, first of all, we'll negotiate as best we can. And then if you can't agree on, we want to give you a 0% raise, you want a 3% raise. The city's not going to go to 3%, we're holding fast at 0, you want 3%. Then you go to what's called interest arbitration, where you go, this is the process that the law provides, where we go to what's called an interest arbitration as opposed to a grievance arbitration. Grievance arbitration is you got fired, you didn't think you should get fired, that's a grievance arbitration. Interest arbitration is this group thinks they should get a 3% raise, and the city says no, we don't want to pay a 3% raise, or we can't afford to pay a 3% raise. Now, there is some good news for cities. Right now, the arbitration decisions have turned the tide, I would say. Starting with January of 2010, we've been getting decisions from arbitrators that are looking at our economic situation and going, hey, the city can't pay this percent increase. And the cities are winning these arbitrations now. So that's some good news, because a lot of times in the past, the ability to pay argument is what we're talking about. Does the city have the ability to pay? And arbitrators looked at the city budget and they said, well, they got all this money. They got, $36 million they're playing with. They got enough to give everybody, a 1% raise or 2% raise. But just recently, just in 2010, we're starting to get decisions from arbitrators who are recognizing the economic severity of our situation and are saying, no more, we can't do it. There's a West St. Paul decision specifically in January 2010 where the arbitrator said the city wins the ability to pay argument and they don't have to pay any increase. So now unions are starting to see that too. I mean, I think that there's a little bit of seeing the handwriting on the wall, but we're running smack up against that. I can't talk specifics for us because we're actually negotiating, but I mean, cities in general have not been making a successful ability to pay argument until this year. Now we're starting to win those arguments. So
I think when you have to
good
bond pay employees,
Pardon?
when you have to bond to pay employees, that's a good argument that you don't have the money if you have to.
Oh yeah. If you have to borrow to pay, or, I mean, cities have a lot, I mean, the Maplewood Community Center needs tons of repairs, just by way of example. And so, yes, even if we have money, we have to prioritize how we're going to spend that money. And if we want to keep the roof from falling in, that's more important than maybe paying employees a certain percent increase. But we've been winning those arguments now in arbitrations. Whoever had their hand up first.
Well, and the city debt should have something to play into it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. The city has money. We have to have money. We have to pay everybody to work, and we have to pave the roads. And
You also have the debt.
Right, right, and we have to manage the debt
And you also
in
have
a
to live with
fiscally
the
responsible way.
Question.
Well, with everybody else taking pay cuts, having their wages froze, and even Social Security is froze, if they get a raise, it comes out of the taxpayers.
And again,
Okay, so the taxpayers can't afford it because they're froze or losing.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that the arbitrators are starting
It's
to,
time that the
take
city
those-
employees start taking, at least freeze their pay too.
right. But I want to have a cautionary note here. I can't, this was an arbitration decision for the city of West St. Paul in January 2010. It was a good decision for the city, but every city is different. Every city has a different budget. Every city has different issues. That doesn't mean Maplewood could necessarily go in and win in the same way, but it provides some hope.
Two questions. Could the representative group take the city to court to get that overturned? Or and vice versa, could you do the same? The reason why I asked that, I've read a situation in Oklahoma where the firefighter said you gotta have a 2% raise. And the arbitrator said, yeah, you got all this money. They went to court, the court said, no, the money's not there. They overturned the situation. Now, is yours binding arbitration or?
It's binding arbitration. There is always, in any legal process, there's usually an appeal process of some kind, but it's termed binding arbitration, it's considered binding arbitration. There could be a situation where you might have an argument to take it to the Court of Appeals, for instance, but usually that would involve some deception or fraud on the part of the arbitrator,
right,
or something of that nature. Generally speaking, if you go to an interest arbitration, that decision is going to be binding.
Right, because there's a case I'm following out in Minneapolis, it was in 2 parts.
I can't quite hear you, but.
Oh, there's a case in Minneapolis I'm following, it's in 2 parts, where there's some members of the Police and Fire Relief Association, which hasn't had any new members since 1980. And the fund, they said by 2015 would be $50 million in the hole. But when you start looking at all the caveats in there, they're basically they get their their pensions increased by active overtime members. They're protected from the downside of the market, so they get the upside, but they don't take the downside. Their health care dues, there's like 5 items that were in there. And the court, they took it to court, and the city laid out the case to make a long story short. The city won.
Yeah.
Because as starting in January 10th, January of this year, there was a lot of retirees that had their pay cut. I know one guy that had his pay cut $350 a month. And then the second part of it was because of a stupid move they made back in the late 90s. They, in this particular individual, has to pay back $43,000 a year. And they quoted Walt Dietzig in there, who has 3 pensions from the city of Minneapolis, saying, well, I guess I'm going to have to go on food stamps. So when you talk about the West St. Paul case, yeah, there is hope. Because I'm hearing about it from these retirees, because they're actually appealing the situation. And the funny thing is they're kind of saying, well, the judge that made the decision replaced the judge that was black.
Yeah.
So she ran, and this judge happened to be white, so she ran on his name, that's how he got in all this other nonsense, rather than the merits of the situation. So, yeah, you're right, it is out there.
And
it's good to see.
John, go ahead. I have something I want to add too, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in general, addressing some of the things that everyone's brought up, I think I'm not going to be stepping over the line to say that the City Council has been, from early on this year, knowing that we're going into labor negotiations, that we've taken a pretty tough line on what we think is affordable. And Chuck gave a budget presentation. We had a workshop last Monday, which you should be able to see. It's in replays, I believe, right now. I think I saw it playing last night.
I think one of the issues.
Well, so what I was going to say is that there are a couple of things having to do with healthcare and so forth. We have a certain amount of leeway in the budget, but if the unions are not what we would consider reasonable, and it does go to arbitration, and if an arbitrator does say, well, you have to give them all 10% raises, not that that would ever happen, we would have to cut elsewhere in the budget to do that. And that might mean laying people off. It might mean cutting back on other services and so forth. But our position is that we don't want to do any of those things. We want to maintain our staffing levels. We want to maintain our quality of service. And we are negotiating with the employees to do that and still stay within the budget with everything that we've lost from the state and so forth. But because of this process and the legal rights and so forth, it's not entirely in our hands. It's not just that the mayor can't hire and fire people. It's that we can't unilaterally say, here's the contract, take it or leave it. There's a very complex process that governs how it unfolds. But I think that the council definitely is aware of the economic environment, and I believe we're all on the same page on needing to hold the line on these cost increases.
And at the same time, I'd like to ask the question, because this seems to be the biggest issue that unions like to use. Come back and they actually have justification. In most cases, you find that if you take a historic parameter on the situation, management has been actually more greedy than the unions have. So I was just going to say that at the same time, we are looking at our management group maintaining the costs and then those areas as well, so we don't have the situation. And this is the reason that a lot of times the unions win, is because they can turn around and say, you voted yourself to increase yourselves, and you're the ones who are now procrastinating on us when you do
It's hard for a worker on a factory floor to take a big pay cut when the CEO is getting a multi-million-dollar bonus.
Yeah.
In Maplewood situation, I think that's a very good point. We on the city council last year, it's written into the Maplewood statute or the Maplewood ordinances that our salaries are supposed to increase automatically according to the cost of living every 2 years, so every time that new council members are seated. And we actually suspended that ordinance. We canceled that increase. So I'm going my 4-year term with the same salaries when I began, back when the economy was relatively hale and healthy. I know that we also did not give an increase to Mr. Antonin's salary. It came up under for review. And I also know that I seem to recall, was it last year or somewhere along the way, that the senior staff, people over a certain salary level, took a smaller COLA than had been granted to the rank and file. So actually, in this case, I believe the senior management of the city has already taken more cuts to set the example, and has taken less increase in the past, and is probably going to be leading the way in terms of setting the example on this right now. I think
That's only 6 people. 5 council members and manager. That's 6 people.
No.
No, also, I believe it was, what was the deal on that salary thing?
Anyone making over 100,000 or over 90,000 had to take less of a COLA
Yeah,
increase.
you're talking about 2 things there. They didn't get anything, now you're talking about a less of a COLA.
Right.
So there's only 6 people that didn't get an increase. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Well, but one of the things you have to remember, though, is that these things go on different timetables.
Right.
The staff salaries were set at a point in the budget process that began last summer. Not this past summer, but last year's summer. The city council, late in the year, when the ordinance was going to kick in on January 1st, we made that decision that we were going to go to 0 instead of taking the CPI increase that was written into the city ordinance. And then several months later, we had the annual review of Mr. Antonin, and we said, we think you're doing a great job, but we're not giving you a pay bump.
Okay, excuse me, John, Mr. All, he can take anything, so I'm going to use him. Okay. So,
You're all.
That's your
tell
reputation,
me
Chuck.
background. No. So Mr. All, you're head of Public Works, right?
Yes,
Okay, and you're the assistant manager.
yes.
So you receive full-time salary for each of those positions?
I received one salary and I have both jobs.
You have one salary, so
Yes.
you would receive that salary whether you were the assistant manager or not?
Correct.
Okay, because I was gonna say,
I received no additional money for taking on the duties of assistant
assistant
city
manager, okay, because I was going to say, because it was my understanding, so that's why it's important to clarify things. If you were receiving an assistant manager's salary on top of what you received as public works, obviously it's because Mr. Antonin can't fulfill the city manager job, but because we've never had an assistant city manager.
We
So
actually, we
Yeah,
did.
it.
Oh, we did? Who
Yeah.
did we have?
Linda Coleman.
Yeah, under Richard Furzman, there was Linda Coleman, she was director of
Yeah,
community
she
development
worked for
and
Greg
assistant city
Copeland and
manager.
then left, and then he didn't replace her.
Okay, well,
So
I
we
didn't,
have
I
an
never
assistant
understood
manager.
she was an assistant city manager.
We had one
There's-
for 15 years.
Did you know there was an
Yeah.
assistant city manager?
Linda Coleman, I knew she was.
I know that she was there, but I didn't realize she had a title
Yeah.
as, okay. But because I thought, well, if we're gonna have two managers, we should have them split a salary instead of each getting. And if Mr. Antonin can't, his salary is a full salary for an manager. And if he can't do that position for whatever reason, then he should maybe have had that salary.
Well, something that's worth remembering about the history of this too, and it's a little bit odd, but you might recall that when we had Chuck acting as interim city manager, we had to remove him, he had to agree to remove himself from the bargaining unit that he was in, and the bargaining unit had to agree to let him out. And then we had this situation after Jim got back on, there was a question too of would Chuck go back into that. Now, because he's assistant city manager as well as public works, he's the other person in City Hall who's not part of a bargaining unit. So he actually serves at the pleasure of Mr. Antonin, unlike anybody else on the management team. So there's a heavy weight on his shoulders. But I think that that's a good thing. Obviously, times like this, the fact that Chuck is able to step in, and also he and Mr. Antonin are on the same level in some ways in relation to the council and in relation to the rest of the city. And so, along with the city attorneys who also are effectively contract employees, but it's effectively in an at-will type position. So that is kind of the core of management outside of any of the bargaining units and things like that.
So my question would be, and I don't know if you know if this is in a statute anywhere or not, I haven't read it recently, but with the Plan B city then, if you have two city managers, is the title assistant qualified for manager?
Yeah,
So,
it's this.
so the city council actually does have authority over the performance, etc., of both Mr. Antonin and Mr. All.
I don't believe that's addressed specifically in the statute. So, like anything that's not addressed specifically in the statute, it probably will be resolved by a lawsuit eventually sometime, where somebody will bring an action based on that theory, and somebody else will defend it. The court will interpret the statute and decide does the city council plan, the manager council plan, include the assistant city manager as a city manager so that they have the ability to hire and fire. I don't know if that's been addressed ever, not to my knowledge.
I would guess that the answer is no.
Correct.
That
I'm an employee of the city and I answer to the city manager.
yeah. So
Right.
if we get together and tell Chuck to do something,
Right.
only if Jim
Yeah.
nods.
The statute talks about city manager.
The
it
council
doesn't say
can't
assistant
take a
city.
vote to terminate me. Mr. Antonin can terminate me even if the council says keep it. So I.
But it's not in statute.
Well,
The
it's-
statute
I
just
believe
talks
it
about
is
city
some-
manager.
somebody-
I'll disagree with the attorney right now and say,
What do you
I
say?
am,
Well, and
I
I think-
am an employee of the city. I report to the city manager, not to the city council, as he just told me.
Yeah, no, what I said was the statute says city manager. Somebody may bring a lawsuit someday and try to interpret that statute to say, well, it says city manager, so that would include the assistant city manager. That would be a matter for a court to interpret.
As of right now, I still disagree with it. I
I have
I report to the city manager.
I-
Contrary to what he just said.
No, I'm saying it says the city manager. I'm agreeing with it. It says the city manager. It doesn't say
that.
Our problem is that Chuck Bethel's an attorney, and so he can't look at any situation without seeing what the two sides would be that brought it to court.
The statute says city manager, 99%. I would agree, he's an employee. Like I said,
all vote.
somebody could bring a lawsuit and allege the opposite, what you're saying, but that's not what the statute says.
See, as far as I'm concerned, I was in the union for years. None of the managers should be in the bargaining unit, period, because they cannot give a unbiased opinion about the two different things.
Well,
They gotta be one of them both.
That's a valid point that.
And if they do on strike, they're going to be actually on the competing side because they have to fill.
Well, I don't think they can go on strike because of the positions that, maybe some of them could, but I think the.
Most of our employees are what's called essential employees that cannot strike.
Yeah.
The only exception to that is the ASPE employees.
Did we get off
Which are
the
none of those
presentation a little bit?
Perhaps, but this is a citizens forum, so we're having.
Can I get on with it? Is that what you said? Well, to me, this is more like the citizens forum because we're all asking questions. My thing is up there, but we're all just talking about it.
I did want to say one thing on that, which is I don't believe we, as a city council or the city manager, could decree to any employees, you can't belong to a bargaining unit. The city manager himself, as a matter of statute, can't belong to a bargaining unit. That's been set out there by the state for that role. But for other employees, if they go through the process with the Labor Bureau and so forth to establish a bargaining unit, that's their legal right to organize.
Right.
Okay. And so we can't tell them, we refuse to have that. We can argue that we don't think that's a good idea, that we think it would be better if they weren't in a bargaining unit.
Well, one statute I looked at said if you control budgets, hire and fire people and something else, you couldn't be part of a collective bargaining unit. It didn't specifically say by title. It says if this was part of your duties, you couldn't be part of the collective bargaining unit. Because I'll give you an example. One of your buddies tried to tell me that the department heads could unionize, and he tried to equate it to the Middle Management Association with the state of Minnesota. I said, just by that pure title of middle management, that's not the same thing as your commissioners and deputy commissioners. And that's how I view the department heads. As far as the defense of Chuck, as far as the city manager, assistant city manager argument, the way I read the statute, the way I interpret it, the city manager can set up division, girls, whatever, that they deem fit. So when Greg Copeland had created that level of management between the department heads and the city manager, he was well within his rights to do that. And he put that in a piece of paper saying, I did it because of unionized, and he took it out. I wouldn't back away from it. I would say, yeah, because they unionized, statute allows me to do just that. So I would have to agree, I'm going to defend Chuck. I agree, he's an employee of the city manager. So if I'm the city manager and I push the red button, I say, Chuck, come to my office with my feet up on my gas, he'll come running with a cup of coffee and the red.
You're exactly right. The city manager has the authority and ability to organize how people are going to work and organize the city in such a way where he has an assistant city manager, clearly an employee.
Now,
my point was somebody could sue on the statute and try to say
anybody can contest.
Well, and on a bunch of these things, the fact is that in one way or another, there has been some legal process. The Confidential Supervisory Association had to go through and a process to get validated, and whoever
Well, we contested when this union was formed, by the way. There was a hearing at BMS that was my first week on the job, actually. 3 days after I started, I attended a hearing about the formation of this, because it had already been formed. And the decision of the person at BMS was we could have a choice of having two new unions, the confidential and the department head union, or combine those two into one union. That was kind of their outlook on it. That they have the right to unionize the department heads.
Yes, I am.
And there could have been theoretically two unions, the department head union and the confidential union, or this was a combination of the two. And since there was only 2 or 3 people who met that confidential definition as opposed to the department head type, then it was all put into one union. And the city agreed at that point rather than fight to stop it, because that would have just been prolonging the process whereby we probably would end up with 2 new unions instead of 1 new union. Why do we have to have all these unions? Well, there's been a growing trend away from unions in the private sector, but the public sector still has high representation by unions. And we're in the public sector, therefore that's why we have the unions. But, you know, originally I won't get into a whole discussion or, you know, seminar on unions and the history of unions. But, you know, back in the day, it was unions were formed because workers were oppressed and they weren't getting fair wage, living wage, et cetera, in the private sector. And a lot of people feel we've come beyond that now, where, like you were expressing, that the unions are now, it's not the oppressed worker, they're getting benefits and pay that other people in the private sector can't even get anymore. And I know that people feel that way.
I think the unions are responsible for the mess that our country is in.
I think it's actually the management.
Well,
Because they keep wanting more money, and the more money they get, prices go up. Then they want more money, prices go up.
I think
There-
that
We were better off in the 50s than we are
we
today.
may need to have you guys have a sidebar for this discussion as well.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a bigger issue.
Not get on the
Exactly.
labor versus management.
Just in front of your name, put acting assistant manager, that is no, they say, no, I'm just pretending I'm one. And then they'll go away. You're still a assistant manager, but you're making believe.
Okay.
Well, what I'm doing is, I want to step in for 1 second and say something here, because I'm tired of fallacy. Let's understand, the jobs didn't leave because of the unions, the jobs left because of corporate management moved them offshore. Most of those jobs are still being made in other countries. They're making the stuff for us. You're buying it every day.
That's because the unions are
No, it's
demanding
because
so
the
much money.
management moved the
We
stuff
can't
offshore.
afford it.
They moved it offshore, the factories.
Why?
You know,
Why?
we
No,
want
they
to
moved
change
it
the salary
offshore because they want the,
All the
The
stuff
pay here
that
is
we're
too damn
buying
high.
here, we are buying it from some management that moved it. And this management made the decision.
They
And
wouldn't
I'm
have
not talking about
moved
Chuck, I'm talking about these corporations.
Are there any more lights that I?
And that, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, honestly, people gotta start to understand.
yeah, but
That's
they
the
wouldn't
whole
have
deal.
moved it offshore if they hadn't demanded so much
No, it
pay.
wasn't the union, it was that they could see.
Hey, hold on. He's got a point. Because right now, China's the hot spot. I remember listening to a program about 5, 6, 7
But-
years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where they were saying that Asia was becoming too expensive. So we're now looking at moving to Vietnam. And
That's right.
Asia did not have unions. So it is corporate management making a conscious decision by saying we want to get this stuff done cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah, but
And
I
they're
still
moving
think
from places that don't have unions. So
They
it's very
destroyed
easy- it's very-
we were better off in the 50s than we are today.
We were better off in the 50s because we didn't have global competition that we have.
That's right.
That's what's doing it.
We also had a lot of strong unions in the 50s.
But we also had a lot of strong
Yeah, very
corporations
good.
that were American-based. And right now, you have the one base that isn't there anymore, which happened to be, say, any duties and imports that came in here. 80%, during the Eisenhower administration, 80% of all the federal taxes that were paid off of duties and imports. It wasn't off of your income. It wasn't off of your house. Now 80% is off your house and off your income. Why did that happen? In 1950, the corporations turned the thing around and said, okay, we want to move offshore, we're going to take our deductions faster, we're going to move the equipment offshore, and they moved it offshore.
Before you go, well, I'll need to say this. There's a very good movie you need to watch, and it was on, I don't have cable anymore. But it's called
I know by
Cable.
experience.
Well, good. This
You
movie-
guys aren't as old as I am.
Yeah, but
I am.
this-
I know that.
let's put it this way, when you were much younger, this movie came out. It's called Executive Suite, starring William Holt. And it was a movie that was made in the 1950s, not the 1950s era. It was actually made in the 1950s. And you listen to, and basically what it amounts to is they had a corporation with a CEO up and died one day. And he died on a Friday, and they died after the stock market had closed. So they were deciding who's going to be the new CEO, when are we going to release the earnings report, because with this CEO died and no one really in succession, how is that going to affect the company? But you listen to some of the comments that were made in this movie in 1950 are some of the exact same things you hear today. You know, I got the governor to put this tax break in that saved us X number of dollars. If we move the furniture from this plant over here to this plant over here, this is how much we can save. And when I first saw it, I was shocked. Because I'm looking at this movie and I'm like, is this 1957? No, it's a black and white movie. William Holt in his prime years in the 50s. And a lot of things that they were saying in that movie then,
And Malcolm
you
Baldwin.
could say, You,
All right,
you
so-
were saying.
At the risk of interrupting the citizens forum, there's a limited capacity for the city of Maplewood to rewrite the American tax code and all its complexity, or to renegotiate any of our trade policies.
All right.
But there can be some agreement to disagree on some of these issues.
Right.
I think from our standpoint, and with what Chuck here does with the city, there's a very complex and established body of labor law, and as we deal with all of the city employees and all of these issues, we have some expert advice to help us navigate that, and the intent, at least, of all of it is to treat everybody fairly, including we, the taxpayers, who are ultimately footing the bill. So we're all doing our best to do that. So let's get back to now the wide open season. And I took some notes on comments that people brought up earlier, so I'm going to try to hit them. There was one gentleman who was here earlier who had to leave. He said he spoke to me in the back of the room during Chuck's presentation, and he said that he was concerned, although he doesn't live in Maplewood, I guess his daughter does. He was concerned about the speed of traffic on Bean Avenue. And he was specifically wondering if the city had an ability to lower the speed or to do anything to, he said people would drive it like a highway. And so I thought maybe Chuck, you might have a little bit of input on that.
Beam Avenue is a county road, so they have the jurisdiction for that. But speed limits are set based upon what's called an 85 percentile. So what it means is that 85% of the people are driving at or below that speed. So the way a speed limit is set on any non-city street, which statewide we're at 30 miles per hour, we can't post it any lower. So I know you're going to give me some examples where there might be a posted speed limit lower. That's not a legal sign. We cannot post below 30 miles per hour on any public street. On other streets like Beam Avenue, what would happen to change the speed limit is that they'd come out and do a study and determine what 85% of the cars are traveling at or below, and that would be within 5 miles per hour where the speed limit is set. So we typically, in a lot of cases, don't ask the question, because in some cases cars are going faster, and in a lot of cases, for instance, when we had County Road D, when it was on our jurisdiction, we chose not to ask the question because then we would have had to raise the speed limit higher than what we thought was safe. And so it would have actually come in at between 45 and 50.
I don't know what this guy's talking about. You can't travel that fast. There's a light, and there's another light. I don't know what
That's my experience too, Dave. There's so many lights that are not
You
well.
can't drive 55 off. You can't.
Although I have certainly been driving the 35 or 40 and had people go by 15 miles per hour faster.
Unless he's talking about it at night, because
It might be.
because obviously during the day when there's more traffic.
Yeah, when there's traffic.
Slow.
And with the construction up at White Bear, obviously, you can't get through there anyway. You're going nowhere. But in the open spaces, there are, especially down by Costco.
Right.
I mean, there are people doing the 50, and I know our police officers spend some time there writing citations, because they come off 61, and they typically can get back up to 50 pretty fast.
Pretty fast, yeah.
If they see the green at
And when you get
Costco.
that light at
But even after
Yeah.
it's usually pretty.
even after you get past the lights, you got to stop sign every other block.
Right, it's every,
Well, anyway.
quarter mile.
Next item, Elizabeth brought up the question of bonuses for staff, and I think we addressed that pretty well during there. For anybody who is watching this later and spaced out, the answer was we don't have any profit sharing. And there, at some point in the past, several managers ago, there was a
Merit up to 5% of salary could be paid in merit.
But that-
Bergsman did away with
that's
that
been
in
at least-
03 or 04.
Okay, so we're talking about
There's
6, 7 plus years ago.
Only steps based
Something
on
like that. Let's see, I'm kind of doing this randomly. Dave Schelling asked that we put important things in the first part of the newsletter. I know the council column is always up near the front.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, now we're going to have this thing about garbage hauling, and it's going to be a very contentious thing.
Yeah.
And you had a July issue,
There's some mention under the area.
and we're going to have one in October. You might mention that there again, because I'll tell you what, in the defense of Maplewood, city of Maplewood, if the people don't get involved, things are going to happen, and let them, and if they don't, if they pull this thing off, we like it or don't like it, I say, too bad.
And on the
Because-
specific topic of trash hauling, we set up a public hearing type meeting for public comment, pro and
Right.
con,
Yep.
ahead of the process, and that's going to be only that topic for that.
Right,
meeting.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
October 4th?
October
And
4th.
if the people don't come up, and personally, I want my own garbage hauler, because I know personally, the minute government gets into things, you're never gonna get it as cheap as I get it. Oh, way up, it's gonna keep going up, I know that, you're government, you know what I'm talking about. But, if the people come to me and start pissing and moaning about something, where were you? Did you go to meeting? What meeting? Too bad.
Well, hopefully people will be aware of that, and I'm sure that Mr. All will pass along to the
That's all I want to do. So it's right in the
general comment that.
Yeah, it's back in the newsletter, and if people don't come up there, then
I emailed the council,
Yeah.
because I don't
Got
have
your
much
message.
garbage, I recycle everything. I have less than a 13-gallon bag of garbage every week, and I'm getting a special rate because that's all I have.
yeah, I get pretty reasonable.
All right, next, also from Dave, you asked about a rumor about RVs. Something about prohibiting RVs or something?
No, like people who have, this guy down Roll Line, he's got a big thing. I keep hearing this thing.
You have to keep them on scary things.
You have to keep it parked on a pavement. You can't-
Well, they're on pavement in the driveway, someone's got a big one in there, and then there's people up there, I mean, these things are all over the place, how can they just say not have them?
They're not. I don't know
Yeah.
anything,
I-
anybody that's saying.
I've heard nothing of that as far as anything
That's-
within the city.
I know a couple of people asked me about that, but that's, okay.
The only thing is,
The only thing
I mean,
we
our
have
code
is-
enforcement officer's out making sure if you got it parked out in the grass or the backyard or out in the street, you can't do that. So
Oh,
you just enforcing the Northern code, you got to have it on pavement.
There's no plan to take away the
Okay,
RV.
that's enough of that, move on.
Okay, and then, well, this is one of the things that's actually, I really like about the Citizens Forum is it's a chance to air a lot of rumors. And
Right.
actually, if we can get back to something that Mark brought up, you raised the question about bringing things to the city council and not getting a response. I've often just felt really frustrated with the format of visitor presentations because I think it's impinging less on the rest of the meeting now, and I know that folks here are going to disagree with me on the reorienting of the schedule. But it's never been a good format for actually having back and forth with residents. And I think in many ways the Citizens Forum is a much better way for that because you can ask a follow-up question, we can try to answer, if we have a staff person here to help, we can figure that out. And it's really easy to, it's hard to do that in a formal meeting setting. And so I think we need to do some repurposing, and I heard a lot of that from other folks about what they want the Citizens Forum to be.
Well, that's why I figured.
To be able to
the
get this kind of
documentation, in both cases,
Yeah.
is really important to me.
Yeah,
And that's why I was trying to get that as the key issue here.
yeah,
That if we document what's coming down, certain people are going to keep coming back no matter what. And I'm one of those who will come back on my issues. I know there's others that you don't want to hear. But it's the idea that you are bringing us back, if we don't see there's any addressing of the issue. And if you put it at least into the actual council meeting minutes so that you can discuss it and take a look at it and consider it as an issue at that point, even if it's a ridiculous issue. And some, but if you take it as an issue, you can tell that person, yes, we did address it, you'll have them satisfied, and maybe they won't be coming back, but if it's addressed the right way, maybe it's an issue that you didn't realize had an importance that might be of value to you.
And to be fair, there certainly have been times when things have been brought forward to us have, there's been direction on the spot to staff, and there's something very clear to be done. It kind of requires it being an issue that we need to figure out how to get our heads around it and identify something to be done that's within our jurisdiction. And sometimes there are various complexities about that, and even taking time to explain it may be something that the person sharing the meeting doesn't want to devote 20 minutes to. But I think that maybe if we can do some more things with things like the Citizens Forum, perhaps we can have some other ways to have more discussion of some of those things. And when it's appropriate and needs the attention of staff for a report and for some kind of action by the council, we can bring things forward at that level.
you made a comment before, and I forget what the subject was, but you said, well, that wasn't me. Okay, so I guess I haven't watched the last few city council meetings where I understand you're not supposed to use names. Is that so? And I'm thinking, oh, it's not right, first of all.
Sure.
But I think when they use names, it has to be respectfully.
Yeah.
Not name calling, but hear me out. Because the problem is that people will assume when someone gets up there, if they cannot say by name who they're referring to, someone else may get the credit and it may not be good credit. And I think that if they have the right to address the person by saying, Mr. Mayor, I have this concern about so-and-so on the council. And you have a right to address your elected officials, you know.
And can I just, and this is part of that too, is what's very important is the city council does not address the citizens, period. Then that gives them more warrant to be able to address them in that form. So for an example, if a citizen tries to send an email to the council, doesn't get a response from the city council, from an email, part of the manager's responsibility in his performance review that the city council put down on him, one of the key things there was you have to address the citizens. That is your responsibility. But if you send letters and requests and it is blatantly ignored, that's an issue. So for me personally, that performance review would be 0 for that because you didn't do what we're paying you as taxpayers to do. You're my boss, or I'm your boss rather, and you're not doing your job to the standards in which I'm paying you for. So, there's a clear, concise way about doing it. And if the citizens do not get their information back in a timely manner in which they, in writing, requested, then that's an issue.
And that is an initial issue of writing things down in the forum and in the council, because at that point you then can refer back to that issue and say, here's what we have determined. Even if you find it difficult, even if you did it in a private situation, you can at least give a response to them that you may not want to put on the TV, but at least as a type.
Before I completely forget all my trains of thought on this, I want to try to wrap together a couple of different responses. Maybe I've already lost my thoughts on it. One is on the issue of minutes and the level of detail in them. I do think that we've kind of gone towards minimizing some of the detail in the minutes, and part of that, I think, is that particularly now that we have streaming, you can get DVDs and DVDs and so forth, it's really hard to have accurate minutes, and it's very staff time intensive if you're trying to do it verbatim, if you're trying to create a transcript. I mean, if you've ever seen what it costs to get a court transcript, that's really tough. And now, because we have this stuff all available online, you can go push the button and say, I want to see visitor presentations, and go back and see exactly what somebody said verbatim, not translated through, not, and then we don't have to face any of the issues of, well, I don't feel that my comments are being reflected accurately. You have to have somebody on the city council think that your comments were being reflected inaccurately and then go in and amend them. So I'm a little bit worried about us trying to get too far down that path. Veronica, remind me what was the thing at the start of all this. It was about...
You're younger than I am, son.
On the email you were talking about, Rachel.
No, I wasn't talking about email.
No,
I was
talking about email.
It's going to responses. So when the citizens...
Okay, let me say something on email, because this was something that you were bringing up, Elizabeth. I personally have one recurrent problem with emails, which I will confess to you all, and that is I'm never sure when an email is sent to the entire city council. Well, first of all, I don't know if anyone else has replied, because typically, to avoid any possibility of sharing information about city business or coming to any kind of consensus or doing deliberative process, I think we all have the practice of not including the rest of the council on emails, because we don't want to run afoul of the open meeting law.
But
so sometimes
your guru And so with that, there's reply all on top, and that's all you have to hit to ensure everyone is copied.
Right, but my point is that I don't want everyone to be copied, because if I respond to Ann and get involved in an exchange with her, with the rest of the council participating or even observing to it, we may be open to an open meeting law violation,
Okay,
because
so
we
what
could
you're
come
saying for
some kind of
specific subject
consensus.
matter.
Exactly.
Well,
Okay.
And
just
so-
if I email the whole council,
So
I
if
get an
you-
answer back from the mayor.
So that's good. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't typically copy the rest of us, because he
No,
doesn't
but I
want to
figure
create
at
a
least
serial
you
meeting.
know what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Yes,
Okay.
and I think it's great to do that. And I, sometimes I respond, sometimes I don't. I kind of have the assumption, although it may be unstated, that it's sort of it's one of those extra duties the mayor has to make sure that something is done with everything that comes to the entire
But
council.
that's the point.
And I
is it
appreciate
needs
getting those
some
emails.
type of response.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you get absolutely zero response, that's when
That can
it
be
causes
frustrating.
an issue.
Yeah.
No, it's not frustration.
Well,
It's
or
not
it can create an
frustration.
issue in-
It's an issue,
sometimes.
period. So that brings down to performance reviews. If you're not interacting with the citizens as requested to do so, when somebody takes the time to especially put it down on paper, then that needs to be addressed because they're not upholding to their performance that we're paying them for.
Ralph's trying to say something.
Yes, and before I get to him, I want to make sure that I've cleared off these other things. I have not forgotten. Sorry,
You'll
Ralph.
never clear it off. Go
I
ahead.
hope you don't get a blood clot or something in there holding it up for so long. Veronica, you were bringing up some of the issues about sort of etiquette and protocol and visitor presentations. I'm not sure I entirely like the way that everything about it is being run. I think maybe, I sometimes think maybe it's goes a little bit overboard on the don't do this, don't do that, etc. But I think that in the past it had kind of gone over the line so many times that I think there was really an effort on Will's part as the person who chairs the meeting, and certainly he's the person, unless the rest of us object to something he does, and decide to vote on whether or not he's in order or to suspend the rules, or correct him or whatever. I mean, he's the chair of the meeting, and so he really does have the authority as mayor to decide how to enforce the rules of decorum as he sees fit. And so the rest of us on the council, by default, we have to defer to that. And I think that there's a wish to not use that as a forum for perhaps bringing up criticism of I personally think lob whatever you want at council members. That's a place where we certainly should be ready to take the heat, just as I'm here to take it today. And that comes with the territory. I think that there's a point when it comes to staff members. If you had if you have a particular problem with police officer X who may have given you a speeding ticket and you didn't like the way they looked at you when they did it or whatever, that's really not the best forum to do that. You could come in and say, I'm concerned about management of the police department because I had a bad experience. But this is not the place, in my perspective, I agree with Will, to be singling out individual people and doing that. Speaking in general terms and making sure that your objections are noted for the record, then go directly to the city manager. And oftentimes on a lot of those issues, I should say, that we get follow-up from the city manager afterwards. We get them in the emails that he sends. He has two. There's one that comes from staff that comes out on a weekly basis, and then he gives us a sort of end-of-week summary of various issues. And he'll often tell us, here's the follow-up on this issue that somebody brought forward, or what have you. Anyway, I hope that answers some of that issue.
So what's to say though is when you don't get responses from management, because that's the one that's supposed to respond to you, that's when you go then to city council meetings and you go out to the podium during visitor presentations.
But we also do have to recognize also.
It reflects very poorly of the city because you're not responding to specifically written documentation.
Sure.
It looks very poor.
Something that I think is important to remember, though, is that there are always going to be disagreements about what response, if any, is appropriate on specific things. And running my company, there are times when you get a letter from somebody and there's something they need, you can take care of it for them, you respond to it. There are some times when they say, I want to do X and Y and Z, and you're just like, I don't even know where to begin with that, or this is just completely not our department, or whatever. And sometimes you may write that back, they may not be satisfied with that answer. They may follow up with additional things or whatever. But if somebody keeps pitching movie scripts to me, I'm going to say, dude, we don't make movies. And then I'm not going to reply to the other movie scripts.
But that's the point, is at least you went the extra mile to say, you know what, thank you very much for your inquiry, but this isn't in my field.
And
But
sometimes
at
that's
least
the
you
extent
reached
of
out
the
to them,
reply.
exactly, but at least you're proactive and reached
Okay,
out.
Val?
to try to-
Now, poor Ralph.
And I have a follow-up from Ralph.
All right,
Wait
and
a
I still
minute.
have more things going on.
No, I still have a follow-up.
Okay, what's really troubling to me,
Okay.
as a city council, you people are sitting up there, you have an issue in front of you, you're asking the staff for particular information. The staff does not have it. Now, when the staff comes to that meeting, they should have every answer, every document available to you on that subject. They say, I'll get back to you. Now, as a citizen, I never find out if they ever got back to you at all. Now, how can that be addressed?
That's a good question. First, in defense of staff, there is a effectively infinite number of questions that might be asked, and it's impossible for staff to be 100% prepared for every possible question.
Basic questions should be anticipated.
Yes, so there's a couple of things. One is that whenever I'm able to, I try to read my packet as early as possible, and when questions arise, I try to send an email to Jim Antonin or to this week I do it to Chuck because Jim is out, or to a specific department head to say, I'm wondering about this. And they might either answer my question in a way where I'm not going to bring it up in the meeting, or I might say, I'm planning to bring this up in the meeting, so I want to make sure that you are prepared for it. And you may have seen that in meetings where Chuck or Dewey or somebody has said, Mr. Nephew asked me about this thing, and so I brought this additional information because I knew that there were questions about it. There are other times where somebody comes in, let's say, for example, some of the recent issues about mobile home park, where somebody comes in and they say, I've got a question about X, Y, or Z, and it has to do with some arcane area of state regulation or law or something where the city may have some jurisdiction, but nobody knew ahead of time, perhaps, that somebody was going to come in with this question, and our attorney doesn't actually know the entire state code by heart, I don't think. And so we need to give them time to respond to those things. Sometimes they do come up in other meetings later. One example on the mobile home issue, where with the manufactured housing park, we've got some stuff coming back to us on a meeting on Monday on some of those issues, and I was on the verge of reading the staff report about it. But there was an issue with restrooms in their storm shelters that were removed. Well, apparently the state law does not require restrooms in the storm shelters, but there was some question as to whether the city's original conditional use permit may have had them. But staff couldn't tell us that offhand because it actually involved physically locating records in City Hall about documents that were filed 30 years ago to see what exactly they said in a photostat, a handwritten something. And so sometimes that kind of stuff.
But the follow-up to Ralph's and his observation about the meetings, two things I guess that I have is that I would hope the council wouldn't assume that everybody appreciates some of the behavior of some people that missed their presentation, because we don't approve of some of the behavior any more than you do. It's inappropriate, and sometimes when the information they want to get across to maybe the public watching, they lose their credibility unless they can present it in a.
And that's from either side of the ditch.
Either side, both sides. And there was another issue there that has completely flew away. But if I think of it, I'll listen.
The guys had a caveat to that too. There's one particular individual we know who has to come up and promote their production. For my suggestion for you guys in the council, when you're sitting on the side, don't engage him. Just say thank you for your time and move on. Don't engage him because he tries to call me and tell me how great he is and give the speech and whatnot. He says you guys look like a fool. I'm thinking to myself, I don't make a fool of myself and just say thank you very much and then move on. Because when you start to engage him like that, that gives them credibility which doesn't deserve.
And I think that you see the kind of dynamic tension that exists on this between exactly that comment and some of Mark's concerns, which is to what extent should we be engaging? Because even if you know there's one individual who is trying to push the boundaries all the time, they may be putting something out there, and if it goes unchallenged, or if it's something where you know there's just a factual question where we can set the record straight, we're not at all consistent in doing that.
John, I was going to mention one thing here before we get off the subject, and I wanted to mention it to Chuck, because I think it's something that he can do that would help you and help the council. And I'm not trying to throw rocks at this point. What I'm trying to say is that what you really need is a liaison. Not a liaison as we're looking at it normally. We're looking at a liaison between the public and the issues. And this could be somebody that's actually apprenticing coming in, so you don't have to pay them a lot. So you can actually use like college students for something like this. And that's why I'm saying these people can sit there, write down the issues, and take them down, to do a little research, get a little information out, and send out letters that are approved out, obviously, by the city manager. But it actually supplies a couple of jobs to some worthwhile college students that are looking to advance into other positions later on. But they're doing it at a low and inexpensive rate, because what they're doing is they're answering those questions that either you aren't aware of or have an importance, or are aware of the importance, but can't really give the answer at this point. But that liaison, he can actually show the letter or whatever communications you decide after the fact to whoever. And like I said, I think he'd be under Chuck's supervision, one or two people who could actually take care of it for you. Just guarantee that people are being satisfied and showing that you are making that
I'm going to
progressive
speak
effort.
for myself. The other point, I remembered it. You got to let me say it when I can remember it.
I just finished.
And Anne's waiting patiently.
I know she is. She said, "Oh, that's fine. You know, we later." But the other thing is, and I don't know, and I haven't discussed this with anybody, but it's been an observation from people that we meet at McDonald's and other groups that we're attend, is that it's procedures about you. That during the meetings, that the mayor doesn't have the capability of being mayor-like, and that you are seen as the mayor. No, this is true. The people say, he is the mayor.
He has to look to you
He has to look
get
to
approved.
you. And the nonverbal communication is there. And the other thing, I can't say it the way I'd say it at home, but basically you save them a lot. And that's very, very noticeable. And you know, we wouldn't want you not to, because I mean, then there'd be nothing.
I've seen situations.
Have you seen it?
where you
Has
answer-
anyone else seen it?
Yes.
Yes.
You answer the questions, you very, very politely answer the questions, and very calmly, and you strung it out where people could understand it,
Right.
took the tension out of things.
Because
We're not the only ones that are noticing that.
Because he's clueless.
So why
I'm
don't you
sorry.
change your badge, too? Change your badge.
Well, you know, I am acting mayor this year, and in fact, I'm not going to be able to stay too late because I have to be somewhere to fill in for Will at an event, because he's out of town and there's something going on in Little Canada.
Oh.
But the thing that I want to say is that I have a really good relationship with Will, and some of it is from us campaigning together, and I think we got to know each other very well, working really hard in 2007. And I think we both have a lot of trust in each other. You know, it's really tough. Apart from just a couple of minutes when we were acting as the EDA, I've never actually chaired a meeting. And so there's a lot of pressure being in that chair, and I think I try to be available as somebody who's sitting there paying attention to what's going on, but is not caught in the moment, which always happens when the focus of the room is on you. And so I hope that I'm helpful to him, you know, when he avails himself of that.
You save him, and the other thing I find it ironic, with all his criticisms of the Diana laundry, that he just, you know, she, for a little person, is up here as far as knowledge, and he's somewhere down here. I mean, that it's ironic the criticism he gave her when in fact, he cannot do what he needs to do in his position without the help of others. And that's pretty pathetic, but I'm sorry, Ann. I'm not gonna say another word.
I'm just gonna respectfully disagree because I think extremely highly of Will, and I think on the whole, particularly in what has been a very polarized city, that he's done a quite good job. And I think our meetings have been moving along fairly smoothly. There are certainly things where I've disagreed with him on all kinds of stuff, as we all have amongst ourselves on the council. While saying that I think the world of Will, I will also say that I'm very flattered by your comments, and so I'm probably flattered. And I will now change the subject because Ann would like to say something.
You're supposed to be a city attorney?
Pardon?
You're a city attorney?
He's actually the city attorney for employment relations and so
Okay.
one of our 2 city attorneys.
We have 2 city attorneys and I'm one of them.
Okay, well, it's a legal question, and it's a recurring issue. Can they legally close a street without a public hearing?
Well, I'm gonna, even though I'm the attorney,
I've never gotten an answer.
I might defer, well, that's not the area that I practice in, so the other city attorney would be better at answering that, but maybe Chuck Hall has some.
I just say yes. The council did
Without
have
a
a
public
hearing.
hearing, you
They
can
did
close
have
the
a
street
hearing.
legally.
And you and I disagree on it. I think they had a hearing, so.
You didn't have a
Well,
hearing, I agree with you, Ann.
You told me
And can the
that I
council
should
do
get
it?
a petition.
To answer your question, Ann, the answer is yes.
You can do it.
Yes. Council has that
Well,
authority.
then why
There's
couldn't
nothing
we get
in
a public
statute.
hearing?
The council had your petition, and they chose not to.
I know.
Okay, so you got a decision you didn't like.
So you got,
But
well,
their
not
choice
just
and
me,
their
the whole
procedures were
area.
there.
The whole area south of Lavender is really upset. And every time we have to go all the way around to get to North St. Paul, and there's people in North St. Paul that have to go all the way around to get to their friends in Maplewood.
All right,
I mean, we're really upset that
This
street
is-
got
this
closed
is
without
something
us being
So,
notified.
Ann, this is something from a couple of years ago, and
But it's
certainly.
still important to
I have-
So let me just say this. Well, whatever notice you may not have had in advance of that specific decision,
We
your
didn't get it.
petition was brought to the city council. And so everybody did have notice afterwards, and the city council had the opportunity to change its mind. And the city council did not change its mind.
Well, they didn't
So
even listen.
that means, well, sure we did. You brought your petition to us.
Yeah, we brought
And
the
we
petition,
spoke
but
about
you
it.
wouldn't give us a public hearing.
A public hearing is just an opportunity to do exactly what you did when you brought the petition. I
With
mean,
4 names on the
functionally-
ones that wanted it closed.
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely right.
people
Because there was
wanted it
another
closed.
neighborhood that wanted, there were more people in the other neighborhood that wanted it closed.
No,
We had 237 wanted it open, and that was a quick
I
petition.
talked to some of the people that signed that petition, and they didn't particularly care, some of them.
They what?
Some of them didn't particularly care. You can get people to sign a petition
No,
for
they
just
didn't
about
care.
anything.
You
Some of them
didn't
did.
hear them.
But
They
the
really
point is,
cussed you
though,
guys out.
the other side would have brought a petition too, and it would have just, I mean, there comes a point where you have to come to a decision and then say, all right, we've made this decision and move on. I mean, it would not be very productive if all of the times where in the recent past that I've been, the one dissenting vote on the city council, or one of 2, if I brought it up and said, well, I want to bring up the sign ordinance again, and again, and again.
Well,
There
the
comes a
council-
point where the decision is made, and then we have to move forward.
The council had 3 decisions, from what I understand, was to improve it, leave it the way it was, or close it. That's what I found out afterwards. Why couldn't it have been just left the way it was? Nobody was complaining except a few people that lived on the other side by Ripley.
Well,
And most of them were from North St. Paul.
and they also have valid concerns, even if they don't live in Maine.
And there were people
But
in that same area
We're
that
going
did
to
not
just
want to
have
close.
to agree to disagree. I mean, keep in mind, you didn't want your street to be repaired, and the council agreed with you, even though that maybe, was something that was particular to
Yeah, but why do you keep bringing up my street? That's got nothing to do with.
Because I'm giving you an
Street.
example. Somebody else might have said, the other people elsewhere in the city might have benefited from your street being done and you being a strength.
No, it's a dead-end street.
But it's a dead-end street that has runoff that goes directly into our neighborhood preserve. And when you talk about pond scum, that other item that you
There's
wanted
no
to bring
ponds
up,
at the end.
it's part of the ecological system where stormwater pollution is what causes algae blooms in a lot of cases.
Well, there's still,
And
you
so-
can still put that
So
drain
part of
box
the
at
big
end of the
picture
street.
here is that
You didn't need a street to put a
what
rain
your
garden.
very narrow interest in that neighborhood wanted outruled a more general interest of a wider area. And so the reason I bring that up is that that's kind of comparable to the particular interests of people there that had a problem with the underage drinking that was going on and the trash dumping and everything in that isolated area. They felt that what it imposed upon them was very strong, whereas the inconvenience that closing the street posed was very diffused among other people.
But they
So-
they exaggerated on the junk that was dumped, because the whole summer and winter, I never saw anything there, and I drove that street every day.
Be that as it may, this is now an issue in the past, and time is ticking by. I want to at least
I know
see
it's
how
a
many
past
things
issue,
we can
but
check off here.
the people in
So,
south of Lavender have not forgotten about it.
A
And they
number,
still,
I'm going to move
Remember
forward.
it for the election, there you go.
There were a number of issues about the Citizens Forum, and I had I don't know if it was by verbally or by email, but I had a conversation with Chuck about the Citizens Forum ahead of the meeting, and I think that there's been some concern about staff, about the commitment of time to have staff members come here, and so I think that we as a city need to be open to what we might want to do with the Citizens Forum. If we like it in this format, if it's better not to have. Did we never actually get to your own? No, we did, didn't we?
No.
It's been so long ago.
Can you tell me why it changed from what we were before to the staff presentation things?
Why is the staff deciding?
I think that Will, as mayor,
No, it's
thought
not
that it would
recorded, I
be
think.
a good idea to alternate who was being the host. So I believe that Will was the one that specifically.
No, that's just the host, but we
Right.
end up with the staff.
With the staff thing,
Part
I
of
think
it.
that Jim Antonin may have suggested that. And I think the idea was to give it some more structure and framework, and to have, and I thought that we had a great discussion on the HR stuff, because it spurs a lot of questions that you maybe have nagging in the back of your mind about different issues, but you don't necessarily bring forward to the Citizens Forum ahead of time. But having the opportunity to ask about, are there bonuses? To ask about how does this process work? What are the parameters of our negotiating ability and so forth? So I think that is a good thing. But I also realize that there may be some meetings where it goes an hour and a half with very detailed PowerPoint, and then you don't have any time.
There's been some meetings where we never had any discussion at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't the purpose of it.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem.
See, I guess
That also needs a lot of staff presentation or effort in order to prepare the
And you know
presentation.
what he did today? His 15-minute, just the 15-minute turned into what, an hour?
Yeah.
because of
So you gotta keep it short. If you're gonna do it, that's fine. But keep it real short, because it's gonna keep going on and on and on.
Well,
Which is fine.
last month's meeting with the class example, we talked about the police department budget, or we talked about the police department. But you had people asking the question, like, how many cops were 57, 67, 77, 87, 90? I mean, those to me were stupid questions. I mean, that's just someone who wanted their 150 minutes a day.
That's right.
But at the same time, I guess I kind of find them rather interesting, because I've never met Chuck Bethel. The only image I have of the HR department was Sherry Lane, and it's not very nice.
Right.
I think Chuck Bethel coming in.
I don't deny
No,
that.
I can say, I think Chuck Bethel coming in has actually done a better job than what I'm seeing in Sherry Lane. That's just my opinion. I've been under Sherry Lane, but I think Chuck Bethel has done a better job. I wish I was there I wish you were there when I was there, because
We don't want your presentation.
you got some. You brought some
I don't
stuff up.
deny that
thought it
they're
was
not
good.
interested.
Sure.
I'm saying that this was devised for the citizens to come with their gripes or whatever, or,
Concerns.
accolades or whatever.
Diffuse
And
things.
talk about them and have the rest of the citizens talk about theirs. And when it's taken up by staff time, we have nothing left to do.
And the other good thing about that is to let citizens talk. Even if you all ignore us, we don't show up at Vista presentations where it's on the record. Be glad we have the citizens forum, right?
But say why we don't show up at citizens' presentation.
Is because you're not allowed to speak.
By an arrogant mayor that won't let you.
That's your words. I have other
Well,
words.
well, not agreeing perhaps with some of the characterization there. I would say that visitor presentations at council meetings is and needs to be a very limited way for communication. And so part of that is because I think the council meetings really need to be focused on getting business done. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, and that's the formal structure for doing it. And so I personally like the Citizens Forum, and I think that it should serve as a richer setting for the back and forth on all kinds of different issues.
We want your presentations though. Because
Well,
the thing is, you could
We're
put them
probably
on
running
chair
out of
show.
departments to do presentations.
I was last.
He was so
Save the best for last.
Maybe.
In a month, I was gonna do the budget.
Better, otherwise we're gonna have a cat.
I think,
gotta go out.
I think the
I
budget is a good one too, and I don't know if we're gonna have a workshop to talk about it or how we as a council can get together and decide what we want to do with the Citizens Forum.
Why are you deciding what you want to do with this? The citizens have decided
Well,
they need a forum.
You can have a forum anywhere you want,
I know.
anytime you want. You can have it at McDonald's every morning.
I realize that, but you should have.
So the reason that I say that we have to decide is because you have to get the council and the staff participating if that's going to be a part of it. Because
Right.
you can call it a rally or a gathering anywhere you want, anytime you want. It doesn't have to be done with the auspices of the city. But within the city, I guess the takeaway that I'm getting is that if there is a staff presentation or presence, that we should tell them, we're only expecting 10 or 15 minutes from you in your plan program. It's going to get stretched out to 4 times that length by people asking questions if they're interested. And if they're not, don't worry about it, because they're going to have lots of other issues that they want to bring up. And so let's keep it at that level, and probably a lot of meetings without any staff person, or maybe with just Jim. I mean, I'm not even sure. I think it's helpful to have the city manager, because he's taking notes and should be getting back to people on stuff and things like that. But it probably can be made a bit more efficient than that.
But when Chuck was coming to the Citizens Forum, I thought it was very helpful because he took notes and he took it back, and whatever they did with it, or they talked about it, or as I've heard sometimes, we were called different names now, and that's okay, so long as the information gets back. I think it's always better for the council and the city in general, for the citizens to have a way to express themselves to the city, and you don't always want it for a visitor presentation. And I'm not saying get rid of the junk, because it isn't junk, it's important, otherwise people wouldn't show up.
Well, what is the sense of people here about the idea of recording it and making it available either online or
Well, that's fine.
I mean, I'm interested in doing it kind of as an experiment, but I mean, is this something that you guys
I
think is going to be
like
available?
that idea. I think even hiring, like I said, a student as a
No,
liaison.
and the problem with any hiring is we're we're fighting over pennies.
Spending too much money now.
And so, what can we do relatively easily? I, as a council member, can just bring a camera here like this.
Right.
The reason that is a good thing, this is a good thing, other than the lady that used to come and record, because I was told, and I didn't have any firsthand except for what other people had found, is that she picked and chose what she wanted to send back or give to the city. Whereas what you're doing is you're recording what actually is said and done, and even maybe we won't like that we said and did once we think about it, but it's actual.
Just in her defense, I'm not aware of any edits being made to those things. She gave a CD to the city. The one time that I requested a copy of one because I wanted it for something, I had been at the meeting and it was the entire meeting. There wasn't anything cut or removed. Apart from when she would turn it off and somebody would say, I want me to record it, and she would stop it at their request.
No, I remember the stuff, because there's some things that I said that were edited and totally out of context.
Right.
So, anyway.
So long as it's shown as
I'm
it
going to have
happened.
something at 1 o'clock, but there are a couple of things that were in the rumor department that I want to make sure we have a chance to bat down or validate or whatever. One was something about matching donations for the Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon.
That was separate from the city, that wasn't anything with the city, that was the Firefighters Association, so that's not associated with the city, so the city has not given any money to the muscular district.
Okay.
And it's something where we as employees, there was an employee contribution,
No,
but the city
she
per
was
se.
representing the city of Maplewood.
That's what she said on.
Oh, she might have said that,
All right.
but again, there's no
And
public fund.
including the Taste of Minnesota.
Yes,
Or-
because that's where a lot of
Right.
She
questions.
was representing the
Oh,
employees.
so was this the fill the booth thing at their taste? Because I put like $5 or something.
There was a combination of where the funds were actually.
Sure.
So because they were collecting donations
But
for muscular dystrophy at their booth at the Taste of Maplewood, and so maybe that was part of it. But the thing to be clear is whether it came from employees or from private donations, and whatever impression may have been conveyed, the city budget does not include money given to muscular dystrophy.
Okay, that's what
And so
I'm asking.
it has not been paid on a city account, it's not
Okay.
tax money.
Okay.
Wherever it came from, that was all.
As an employee, I mean, we sponsored something and I contributed
Okay.
out of my group.
Yeah.
But that's the employees, not the city itself.
Right.
Okay.
And so the other thing is that the one thing that we do give charitable money to is just the charitable gambling tax revenues, and there's the application process, and that comes in front of the city and so forth. And so, but I don't recall that the Muscular Dystrophy Association has ever applied for those.
That's discussed in public.
Yes, and that is discussed in public
Right,
because
right,
it does come
right.
through the authority of that gambling tax. All right, so that's struck off the list. There's general love for Michael Folds, we noted that. And some criticism as well.
I'll get that.
Make sure he gets both.
Michael's been really good.
Yeah, I get along great with Michael. I think he's doing a fantastic job. But sometimes we just kind of geek out, I guess. I'm saying he's wonderful because I want him to put this video in rotation on the same cable channel. Taste of Maplewood, there was a question about, do we have any results?
No, I just
need
just a quick, how did it come out?
We're still pulling the numbers in. We budgeted $35,000 of tax dollars to support
Wow.
that. So, and we're going to be really close to that.
You sure getting it back?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the cost is probably over 50,000, but with the charges and everything, we get back about 15 of that. So, tax dollars, we budget about 35,000.
Okay. So this is something that I'm going to be looking forward to the presentation on it. I think I perhaps gave Karen a little bit of a hard time asking questions about it when we had it in the budget for this year. And certainly from my perspective, we've heard a lot from people about the 4th of July fireworks, and there's really a sense that we shifted the funds from one thing to another. I, for one, am interested in looking at it very closely because if we're simply going to be spending some money on it, then we have to be asking, is it going to be pulling its own weight? Because my defense to people who said, hey, you canceled the fireworks is to say, well, in theory, the Taste of Maplewood is going to get to the point where it's self-sustaining and, a very, very small amount. And so I think we're going to have to look really closely at whether it's actually doing that. And if it's not, how long are we willing to give it to try to get to that point? And anytime you're releasing a new product on the market, you face that question, how long before we cut bait? And so.
We heard that about the community center.
Yeah. Well, the problem with the community center is you cut the bait and it's still sitting there.
It was supposed to be self-sustaining too, and it never has been, as far as I know.
Well, and that predates me, so I can't speak to all the arguments going on there, but I can certainly affirm that we're continuing to look really closely at the community center, and there are some changes that staff is working on right now about things because besides the operational expenses, there are a lot of capital issues with, it's a big expensive asset that belongs to us, the taxpayers, and as much as we may not want to have to put money toward it, there comes a point where is it better to spend the money now to repair the roof or to wait until a roof collapses on the gym and the pool? And then how far are we behind relative to the asset that we own?
Well, we asked that question in New Orleans, so look what happened.
Yep. Let's see. Ann had a comment about some ongoing litigation in the city. I think we kind of covered that when you brought it up pretty well. And it being pending litigation, we have to be pretty careful about going too much into, we can't really have a back and forth about the merits of it.
There's a one
but I-
pond on Sterling,
Oh, in the pond.
south
yes.
of Larkmiller.
Okay.
Somebody has an aerator there, because every once in a while they turn it on and you can see clear water. But then they must turn it off and then it's getting really thick. And when my kids were little, there wasn't the algae on the pond. They used to skate there all winter and all the neighborhood kids played hockey and
Yeah.
nobody uses it.
Chuck, you have anything else to add about that?
Sure, most of the ponds, right now, the green, there's two different things. If the pond looks like pea soup, that's algae.
Yeah.
This time of year, what's happening is that there's oxygen getting in there, and you'll see what's called duckweed on top. That's good,
That's good
because
stuff.
that means the pond, the water underneath is clear.
Yeah.
So if the water column, I'm not gonna, I can talk about this for hours, but the reason it's changed over the years is that more and more people use phosphorus, and leaves are dying, and they dump their grass clippings around there. All of that decomposes, turns into phosphorus, and the algae just loves phosphorus, and it multiplies like rabbits.
Yeah, I know.
They just
It's
boom,
algae.
and algae. And
It's
so,
really thick on the one pond
Right.
south of Sterling.
right, and so our neighbors are getting old, our neighborhoods are getting older, and as our neighborhoods get older, our ponds, that phosphorus doesn't go anywhere. It turns the grass green until this time of year when it goes brown, and when it turns brown, it releases it all back into the
See,
water.
it always was clear, but then that was 10
Yep.
acres, it wasn't developed. And
Well,
now
I-
they-
And now we've got all the runoff and the yards and the roofs and downspouts, it all goes into our ponds. And so we keep our ponds green so that our lakes are trying to get.
But we took our daughter Margaret somewhere one day and we got the whole lecture. She explained the duck stuff
Yep.
as if it all looked the same to me. But she says, no, that's good stuff.
Duckweed is good.
And
This
we
time
don't
of
have
year,
the
you see a lot of
open
it.
space we used to have, and just call it dog days of summer.
Yep.
Thank you for
Well,
taking the extra time.
Sure,
Thanks.
and hopefully I won't be late for this 9/11 thing. But thank you, everybody, for coming. It was fun,
Thank you
as
for the
usual.
presentation.
Thank you, it was nice to
And,
meet you.
If you gentlemen could help me,
Yeah,
I set
sure
this
will.
up, if you could help me just.
Yeah, and I hate to run away and not help, but I guess that's what I'm going to do.
Another gentleman, and I'll sure try to go.
See y'all.